The cost of childcare has been skyrocketing in recent years, with many families having to make big decisions about whether or not parents can go back to work. Full disclosure, I myself have two small children in childcare, and I was momentarily shocked, I have to admit, when I discovered that fees would be going up $6 a day per child from next year at my childcare provider. So what is behind the increase? Lynn Connolly is the New South Wales President of the Australian Childcare Alliance. Good morning.
How are you this morning, Lauren?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for joining me. It seems that the cost of childcare is increasing well above CPI. Is this before we get into the reasons why, can you just tell us, is this a common occurrence across the state and in regional areas?
Well, it is. Every year childcare centres need to put their fees up to catch up with whatever regulation changes have been brought in over the past 12 months or so. Plus, childcare centres are really like children's other homes, and in your home you've got rising power costs and insurance costs, and your rent goes up every year. So childcare wages, there's always a pay increase every year. So centres have no choice, if they want to keep the doors open and providing the high-quality services to families so that their children can have an early childhood education and so that their parents can go to work, then they've got to put the fees up. They have no choice. And the sad thing is, it's been a decade, 10 years, since there was any decent increase in funding for families by the federal government, while at the same time there's been enormous regulation changes, ratio changes, 1 to 8 for 2-year-olds, 1 staff member to 8 2-year-olds went to 1 staff member to 5. And while that sounds good to parents, that means of that group, 37.5% of the income disappeared. So that teacher still has to be paid. So the remaining 5 children, the fees have had to go up. So over the years, people have been trying to catch up. Now, even as late as October last year, there was another regulation change where, firstly, with your educators, your staff, under industrial laws, and of course no one in their right frame of mind would expect somebody to work 7.5 hours without a break, and of course it's not allowed under industrial law anyway, so educators do have to have a break. So what used to happen, and has happened for as long as I can remember, and I've been in the industry 41 years, that providing the educators were on the premises, they could still be counted in your staff. So traditionally what would happen is at sleep time, 1 staff member in a room would go off and have some lunch, or they might even just sit together and have lunch while the children are asleep. That doesn't happen now. You are not allowed. The only time you don't have to replace a staff member is if they go to the toilet. Now, for every other thing, you've got to replace a staff member.
Childcare, it's huge responsibility to be looking after such young children and to make sure that they get the right level of education and care. There is so much to it these days, but it does seem like there has been a significant increase just recently. Is there anything specifically, now you've sort of talked about over the last 10 years or so, there's been a number of things culminating towards this moment. Is there anything, in the last year or so that's really put pressure on prices?
Well, it was only 2016 that the ratios changed for the 2-year-olds, so it's not that long ago. And centres are trying to catch up. If centres had have put the fees up to cover that regulation change the day it came in, fees would have gone up $30 and $40 a day. Mm. So what the centre owners have done is tried very hard, because we work with our families. I'm sure your children, you said you have 2 children in care, so the people where you take your children to the centre, they know you. They know everyday life pressures for the families that are using their centres. So we don't want to just put fees up for the fun of it. It's not just something we just do. It's something we have to do, or we need to close the doors. And coupled with all of this is oversupply across the nation. So oversupply, normally in industries, if there's oversupply, it puts downward pressure on fees. In early childhood education, it doesn't. Because if you've got, for example, a centre of 40 children paying $3,000 a year rent for each place, 40 places, if you've only got 20 children in the centre, those 20 children have to pay $6,000 a year. So we are so heavily regulated. It's the regulations that force the cost of care up. It's not the centre owners. We have no choice.
And what have your discussions been with the state and federal governments around regulation?
Well, firstly, we try to explain the state governments are the ones who actually pass legislation through the House in relation to regulation. So they, over the years, have pushed up the cost of care, but they don't have to fund it. It's the federal government that funds the families. So there's no They're not talking to one another. It's not just now. It's been for the last 30 years they don't talk to one another. Well, since 1991, actually, is when federal government funding for families to use private childcare centres came into being, so that the private sector would provide the services needed for families to go out to work. And now we also, of course, provide the early childhood education, which we have done for many, many years as well. It's not just babysitting. And I'm sure you can see that with your own children, you know, the growth and the development, etc. So we have no choice, is what I'm saying. I want the people of Wagga to understand, and like the people right across Australia, we don't put the fees up. We're not nasty people. It's a kind, caring industry sector. So therefore, we feel your pain, and a lot of our educators are in the same boat as you are. They don't want the fees to go up for their children either. But in order to be able to provide the service, we have no choice.
And Lynn, when there's a new childcare subsidy system that the federal government rolled out from the 1st of July, there was some speculation in the lead up to that the admin, surrounding that would force childcare operators to put their fees up.
The admin around that has been enormous and absolutely unimaginable. It was a system that was rolled out. It did not have any trial period whatsoever. They introduced it to 1.2 million families and about 15,000 services on the one day, and it was absolute and utter disaster, with staff members working, you know, my own staff members are working into the night trying to get it to work. And it's just horrendous. The extra workload from that, which means people have had to be put on more staff to cover staff to even get the system, and the system's still not running properly.
Okay, Lynn, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much for your time this morning.
Yeah, so I apologise to all you people in Wagga, but we do not do this just for the fun of it. We have no choice. In able to keep the doors open, we have to pay our staff, darling.
Oh, I appreciate you explaining that to people in the Riverina. Have a good day.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. That's Lynn Connolly there. She's the New South Wales President of the Australian Childcare Alliance.